Okay, this continues our lectures on section 2.5. Now we're going to discuss the percentage. A percent is a part of 100. We've already seen this in a previous little mini lecture. And there are three equivalent forms: a fraction, a decimal, and a percent. So with example number 27 here, I'd like to go through the three ways to get amongst these equivalent forms. So equivalent forms mean that they are exactly equal. So from 75% to a fraction, we can simply read it 75, and then the percent means parts of 100. And then from there we want to get to a reduced form of a fraction, so we take out the GCF, which is 25. So dividing 75 by 25, that of course gets us 3, and 100 divided by 25 gets us 4. And so there's our equivalent fractional form of 75%. Remember, they must be in reduced form. And then we have two options to be able to move amongst the fraction and the decimal, or the percentage straight to the decimal. Now, if we want to move from a fraction to a decimal, we're going to divide the numerator 3 by the denominator 4. So 4 goes into 3 0 times, 4 goes into 30 7 times with 2 left over, and 4 goes into 25 times, and that shows you your equivalent decimal form to this fraction. Now we can also move straight from here to here as well, because we can just read this as parts of 100, and parts of 100 means dividing it by 100. And if you remember right, when you divide anything by 100, that means you end up moving the decimal 2 places to the left, because doing this division problem says we have 100 will go into not 7, not 5, not finally 750 7 times, and then 50 left over, and so now it'll go into 500 5 times, and you see there's the equivalent. So the shortcut for doing that is moving the decimal to the left 2 places, and so moving left to the 2 places gets your equivalent form to a decimal. So those are all of our equivalent forms. Now I mentioned before that it's probably not a bad idea for you to memorize all the equivalencies that you see here on this page of your notes. And I had shown you these earlier in section 2.2, I believe, was where we talked about those. So you might want to look over those. These are on page 24 of the chapter 2 notes that I've provided for you on the website. All right, now moving on. We need to know a few facts about converting fractions to decimals. First of all, there's always a decimal after a whole number. So when we wrote the 3 divided by a 4 over here, there was a decimal right here. And then you can keep putting zeros, as many as you want, to the right here. There are 3 types of decimals. There are terminating decimals. These are terminating decimals. There's non-terminating repeating decimals. We saw those in a couple of our examples before, where we saw things like this, 0.83333, so on and so forth. That's a repeating non-terminating. And there's a final type of decimal. It's called a non-terminating, non-repeating. Non-terminating, non-repeating, those are irrational numbers. They can't be achieved from a fraction. You won't see them in these. So even when you think you're seeing one, you aren't. There is a repeat. Okay, we can round a decimal just like we can a whole number. We saw that in our last example as well. Our last example, remember, we saw this round here, and I said this is 3/8, and so I rounded it off to the 4. That we can round, meaning we can round just like we could. Repeating decimals are shown with a repeat over the thing that repeats. So we saw this one right down here, where we saw the 3's repeating, and we put a bar over the repeating number or numbers. And non-terminating repeating decimals, they're really best left as fractions. And we saw that 0.83333 was actually 5/6 in an earlier example, and we saw where I left that as a 5/6 rather than the whole number 0.83333. So those are some facts that we need to know. Now the next thing, converting a fraction to a decimal. I've already talked about these steps, and we've seen this before. So in the next lecture, I'll go through these examples just to make sure that we're aware of these, but we're only going to be doing this process right here, numerator divided by a denominator, in order to make a decimal of that. So I'll see you next time, and we'll talk about converting fractions to decimals.